The Ahmedabad air crash, in which 290 people were killed, exposed the state of affairs in India's aviation industry. In the aftermath of the air crash, the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the DGCA conducted audits of several airports and airlines. And the findings are extremely shocking. There are lapses at multiple levels. And this brings us to the question, is air passengers' safety taken for granted in India? In this week's In Public Interest, I sit with aviation expert Captain Mohan Ranganathan to try and find out what exactly is happening in India's aviation industry post Ahmedabad crash. Before I go any further, I need to pause here for a moment. In Public Interest is a new show on the News Minute where I, along with my colleagues from across South India, will bring you stories that matter. If you want a particular issue to be covered or a story to be discussed, do write to us. Remember, this show is truly in your interest, the audience who are sponsoring it, and not a political party or a corporate entity. So scan this QR code if you like our work. And if you want to support us or contribute to our reporting fund and support independent journalism, click the link below. So thank you so much for talking to us. Sir, when will we get to know what exactly happened with the Air India flight in Ahmedabad?
See, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has laid down certain norms in the Annex 13. And the standards are very clear. And they said the investigation is not to apportion blame, but to identify what caused the accident and what are the steps you need to prevent a recurrence. That is the principle on which the accident investigation is done. And they're supposed to come out with a preliminary report within 30 days, so that in the public mind, they have some understanding of what happened. But in India, you never get a preliminary report. And you also have a problem because everything is under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. You do not have a professional background with any of them. They may be trained for administration, but there's not a single person there who's aviation expert there. So, and when even the final report is made, it is vetted by the ministry. You'll have a joint secretary who checks that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Anything which is embarrassing for the government or the government agencies, which means DGCA, Airport Authority, and even the airline, that is all deleted. And so you don't get to know. They'll make these announcements, and with a lot of fanfare, the media will carry it. You saw the announcement recently and the findings, which they've said. Now, some of them are very, very serious. I'll give you one example, which, if the DGCA really means business, they must take action. They say that in one of the cases, the simulator in which the training and checks were being done is not even the type of aircraft that the airline was using. So technically, every single session on the simulator is invalid.
You train a pilot on something else, and then he's being handed over to do something.
You are supposed to have, the simulator is to match the type of aircraft that you are checking the pilot on. It's like carrying out a Boeing pilot, do a check on the Airbus. I'm just giving a simple example. Doesn't validate his license. You're supposed to do a simulator session every 6 months and your instrument rating every year. And you have certain parameters where See, there are many emergencies which you can't carry out in an actual flying. So that is why the simulators were created. Now you got what you call the level D simulator, which can match every maneuver of an aircraft and every emergency without endangering safety, because it's only a simulator. Even if it crashes, the simulator can be reset and you can continue the session.
Okay.
So when you are doing it on a simulator which doesn't match the type of aircraft you had, technically you have not done your license renewal, you have not validated your checks. And if we are just saying, to me, that's a criminal offense if an airline has done that. Will the DGCA and the ministry have the guts to ground that airline? They won't.
So you said that most of the reports will not come out.
Yeah.
Why is that so? Like, because when something like this happens, a committee is formed, the DGCA investigates this, and in this case, they have it's a big investigation team that will look into all the aspects.
You've seen the investigation team. Joint Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Inspector General of Police. Do any of them have operation experience? Do any of them have maintenance experience? Having paper qualification is not actual experience. So to me, that committee was a farce. And take, for instance, I'll go back to the Mangalore crash. You had an air marshal, you had a pilot, you had an engineer, wing. And the final report, they only spoke about the pilot. He was sleeping, touchdown late. But it was what they covered up was a blatant violation of ICAO NX 14 standards, where the ILS localizer was housed on a concrete structure. The aircraft wing hit that. The wing broke, and as it was going down the hill, fuel spilled onto the engine, it caught fire. And if you see that report, they will talk about it caught fire when it hit the thing. You see their own report. There's no evidence of fire on the broken wing, which is lying right next to the localizer housing. And the first crash tender, which the report says reached in 3 minutes, 55 seconds, that was bogged down outside the Mangalore airport in that sharp thing. It was a runway, and the road was wet. Even a Schumacher couldn't have done that in 3 minutes 55. There are 3 hairpin bends, narrow road, slippery, and the crash tender was bogged down just outside, and with the airport director's car just behind that. A young journalist gave me the photographs in strict confidence that I don't divulge the name because her whole career will be ruined. But it is such a sham. And the other thing is, after an accident, you're supposed to sanitize the area.
The entire area.
Until the investigation team identifies every bit of the debris relating to the aircraft. You had that photograph of a couple of security guys and 2 officials walking on a wing of this latest one. It's a joke. People abroad are laughing at our safety concepts. Now, when something is, you're supposed to map everything with GPS position. So, the investigators will identify how the damage is taken place and how it is spread. But here, and for the Mangalore, until the report came out, I was part of the Civil Aviation Safety Advisory Council Committee. We were allowed to go and inspect Mangalore and Calicut after the report came out.
Okay, after the report came out.
Yeah. So when I went there, first thing I noticed that concrete structure was replaced with a steel girder. 1st January 2010, all structures in that area are supposed to be frangible. Like, that famous Emirates takeoff accident in Melbourne.
Okay.
He hit the localizer.
Hmm.
The undersurface was ripped and all, but still he was able to land back, except the aircraft was damaged, no fatalities. But here, 158 people were burned to death in their seats. I've got a gruesome photograph of that because the rescue didn't reach them. So they make the report covering up all the deficiencies, the failures, and that is how it'll be. I call all reports, accident reports in India as garbage because it is all doctored and a lot of cover-ups are there. Now, they've announced these findings.
Yes.
I can take a bet with you. If he had the courage, the minister and the DGCA, they should ground that airline because not a single pilot has got a valid license because his validation has been done on a simulator which does not match the aircraft he's flying. So if an accident takes place, an insurance company can refuse to pay your insurance because you have not done the legal procedure. Yeah. And then here you're talking of we've carried out audits of airports. Are we going to do it?
Yeah, I'll come to that, the audits of the airport. But before that, how compromised are we?
100%.
100%.
100%. I'm not joking. We had absolutely no respect in the safety world outside India.
Now, can you compare this with someone else, some other countries? Like, then people will be able to easily understand. Like,
let me give you an example which goes back a long time. New Zealand. New Zealand and Canada are two of the safest aviation systems in the world because they've learned a lesson and they have put in place a very, very strict safety culture. Long time back, there was an Air New Zealand flight which was taking tourists to show Mount Erebus. The airline had given wrong coordinates. He was flying in visual conditions. And given the wrong, and then there was clouding. The wrong coordinates were fed into the inertial navigation system. And they went into the mountain and all died. The airline gave false information, doctored the report, and the officials had also, and the pilots were blamed. Several years later, a judge was appointed to reinvestigate that. His name was Justice Mohan. He found that reports, the statements of the airline, and the coordinates which were wrongly fed, they were all covered up. And in his report, he wrote that report is it is a litany of lies. And he struck it down. And in fact, the Pilots Association New Zealand really worshipped him for what he did. He set up the thing and the whole system changed there. After that, they became very focused on a human life is important, is not the airline. In Canada, there was another judge who was involved in a crash in Dresden. And they approached the judge to change this, what he called massaging a report. So finally he wrote that this is all massaged and he struck down. He came down hard on the accident investigation, even the regulator. They changed the system. And you don't find this kind of... take even Pakistan. When a crash takes place, the preliminary report comes in less than a month. And the Karachi court came down hard on the regulator after a couple of crashes. Have you ever heard of any court coming down on anyone here? So they can have these findings, which are very serious, And talking of same repetitive snags, that was another point which is there. I'll tell you what the airlines do. We have what's called minimum equipment list. That when something fails, we have category A, category B, and category C. Category A, rectification has to be done the same day. Category B, you got 72 hours for them to get the part. Category C does not affect safety, but it's required. So you have a leeway of 10 days. What airlines do is on the 10th day, they'll remove the defective part from one aircraft, take a good part from another aircraft and swap it. There'll be no record.
So there'll be no record, and this will be considered as something which has been
It'll be
rectified.
And the next pilot who flies that will report it, and that 10 days will start from there. So technically, if you have 10 aircrafts, your Cat C becomes 100 days. See, this is a trick that majority of the airlines do.
Now, this culture of neglect, this culture of taking air safety for granted is something that has been questioned time and again.
Yeah.
It happened after Mangalore. It happened after Kozhikode. But nothing seems to have changed. Why?
Because we have the weakest judiciary in the world as far as aviation safety is concerned. Now, take for instance the Mangalore crash. In 2001, an activist from Bangalore, Leo Saldana, you must have heard of him.
Leo, I know him.
He filed a case, and when they were proposing the new runway at Mangalore, he said the lay of the land is not conducive for safe operation. If an aircraft overshoots, it will go down 80 to 100 meters down the ravine and rescue will not be possible. Karnataka High Court struck it down. He went all the way to Supreme Court. Supreme Court also took the word of the government. DGCA ministry and the airport authority. And they passed an order saying that the government shall comply with rules and regulations. That's all. But they dismissed the case. When the Mangalore crash took place, it went down 100 meters. Rescue was not possible. 158 lives went. A PIL was filed by Yashwant Shenoy with photographic evidence which I had shared with him. Because when I did the audit, it was shocking. And he filed the PIL. And that was when I lost all respect for judiciary, because the PIL was set aside and the judge, the bench, gave the entire case file to the ministry to study if it's worthwhile case. It's like asking a murderer to decide whether he's guilty. After that, I realized that here we fly on horoscopes and we don't fly on anything else.
Now, coming to the measures that have that the DGCA, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and others have taken after the Ahmedabad crash. What does this all mean? Like, given the backdrop, given the culture of neglect that we have been seeing over the years, what does all this mean?
It just means that if you're connected, you can get away with murder. That's all. Now, they formed this. Take after the Calicut thing. Did they cut short the runway length? No, they didn't. We're going into a season where we know that nowadays it is not like the old monsoon rains. It is high intensity rain. In short duration, but do you have the quality, the training standards of people flying in monsoon weather? If you see that Indigo flight going into turbulence, if you understood how you recognize turbulence, how you avoid weather, that aircraft won't have got into it. To blindly try to go into a thunderstorm without knowing what the radar returns are indicating. It shows poor airmanship and poor understanding of the system. Okay, they've they've grounded the pilots or whatever. But it could have been a disaster. They were lucky. And to say that we've taken action. In 2001, I was part of the DGCA team in operation. We brought out the approach in landing accident reduction and adverse weather operation training kit. About hail damage, the thunderstorm, weather, it will graphically, it's a PowerPoint. All airlines are supposed to have that for their pilots. Show me one airline which is seriously doing that. When you hear about, when I said Annex 13 said you should prevent a recurrence, how many aircrafts have come in high and fast, touched down late and gone off the runway and been written off? We've had so many. Have they prevented a recurrence? How many tail strikes you keep reading about?
The one that happened in Trichy was alarming.
That they tried covering up, saying it was not. The guy had not locked the cockpit seat, which is the first thing you do when you get into the cockpit. And the tail strikes. Even Chennai had a tail strike in Chennai a couple of days back. You have more than a dozen tail strikes, which shows that the training is poor and the flying standards have dropped. You should be able to recognize. When we were all, in the beginning, we were told, you fly the aircraft, don't let the aircraft fly you. See, we had, apart from having the automation, we also had very good manual flying skills. Today, a large number do not have manual flying skills. They are slaves to the computer or what they see on the weather radar. They're not able to interpret because it's like a factory churning out pilots to fill a seat. How many are capable of handling an emergency? I have my doubts.
Okay. So the latest surveillance that was carried out at several airports by the DGCA has revealed numerous discrepancies, some major lapses relating to aviation security. For example, I'll read. There were multiple lapses reported in defects reappearing many times in an aircraft. Like you pointed out, the 10-day period. They keep changing the things. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. And then ineffective monitoring and inadequate rectification actions on the defect. This is reported by the Indian Express. So it also says that there is no proper paperwork done. Safety precautions during aircraft maintenance is not being maintained properly. Then there are defects in the report that are not being recorded in the aircraft logbooks. So whose responsibility is all of this?
Airline. And the DGCA is supposed to audit an airline every year. They're supposed to audit an airport every year. Surveillance safety. There's a checklist.
Yeah.
And they are supposed to fill it up. I can share with you my audit report of Mangalore and the DGCA audit, which was done just 2 days before the crash, where the DGCA official has said
everything's fine.
Everything is as per ICAO standards. And that crash took place, people said he should not have taken off. Yes. But why did he take off? Because the marking there, instead of indicating he had only 500 foot of runway left, it indicated he had 2,000 feet of runway left. So in his mind, he would have thought, I can clear that big obstacle which is there, the localizer. But 2 days prior to that, the DGCA man has said all markings are as per ICAO standards. So people go, you may call me an anti-national or anti-system, but they go because they go have the samosa and tea, tick all the boxes and they come back. Now, after the Calicut crash, you had the DGCA announcing that we will carry out 2 safety audits of all airports.
Every year, I think.
Every year.
They'll...
Every year, 2 safety audits. Now, going by every minister's statement or in the parliament, we got 150 airports. So
147 airports.
147,
Yeah, 147 airports.
So that's 294 days are required for the 2
Audits to be conducted.
Each audit takes not less than 2 or maybe 3 days. So you got DGCA, which is badly short-staffed with qualified people. You got air traffic controllers, short-staffed. You got shortage of pilots, and you got shortage of engineers and even cabin crew. But airlines want to bring in 100 aircraft, 500 aircraft. Do we have the manpower, qualified manpower? It's nice to say that I'm an airline with 1,000 aircrafts. But when you have,
we have the manpower.
Qualified manpower.
With the airline, you mean?
Yeah. And the regulator.
And the regulator, DGCA.
Regulator.
Yes.
Does he have the manpower to carry out the surveillance? After the Mangalore crash, there was a recommendation that the Flight Standard Directorate inspectors should go during the WOCL time, that is the midnight, at least once every, I think they mentioned 1 week, but you don't find, none of them will go because the timing is inconvenient, And so these audits are more a paper-taking exercise than doing all this.
Okay. So in this, again, I'm quoting the Indian Express article, which says that safety precautions found were not taken by the AME, Aircraft Maintenance Engineer, as per AMM, Aircraft Maintenance Manual, at places, which means that the safety precautions were not taken care of by Aircraft Maintenance Engineer. Who is doing that?
Okay. Do you have, sometimes you have these stayover checks, as they call it, which is done during the night or when there's a long stop. A stayover check will take not less than 2 hours. The aircraft may be coming at midnight and the departure may be 4 o'clock. He's got 4 hours. You may have 2 or maybe 4 night engineers, but there may be about 15 aircrafts. Does he have the time to check everything which is there in the checklist? So what they'll have is a technician who will do everything.
Not an engineer.
Not an engineer. He'll bring it to the engineer to sign. And this has been going on for a long time in India.
And is this something that we should be concerned about, right?
They should be concerned because it is not a qualified engineer who is doing that check. It is a technician who is not really conversant with the system who will be ranked. So when you find same defects are continuing
again and again,
he's just looking at thing. Okay, this part takes it off. Has he checked it?
Gone and checked it in person?
Yeah.
Which ideally he should be doing that, right? Okay. So how do you classify these lapses from the surveillance that has been carried out by the DGCA?
They have different things.
Yeah.
Level 1, level 2, level 3. But do they really take action? They announce that the crew have been derostered, the engineers grounded.
Those are all breaking news material. Yeah.
But the aircraft break, the news doesn't break. When something goes wrong, it's beyond a human. Yeah. So they have to be very, very. One of the things that if they really want to do, when surveillance is being done, videograph the whole thing, then they are compelled to
take action.
Yeah.
Or at least there is proof. There is proof, there is documentation. So now, how do you classify these lapses basically? These lapses are, like, to my knowledge, for a common man, I trust the pilots, I trust the airline, I trust the DGCA or the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and I travel. Airport itself is an intimidating place. The moment you go get in, all you want to do is clear your baggage, your security and everything, and all you want to do is board the aircraft. That's about it. I'm not, sitting and thinking about all these things. Like, what does it mean for the common man? Like, how do you classify these lapses? These are major lapses.
I'll take one sentence you made. I trust the thing. Now, years back when the Mr. Desikan of Consumer Association, when they did a survey, there was a seminar also, and they sent out a survey to all the passengers, the public. What do you choose an airline for? Safety was about the last thing that in that percentage.
Because we are not familiar with
what is the most important thing when they look? Safety was, I think, about the last or second last item. Cost of the ticket was primary item. So if you are selling, you're an unsafe airline, I'm a safe airline, but your ticket is 100 rupees cheap, majority will choose your airline. So that is what is the mindset of most of the travelers here. So to think that I don't trust, it doesn't happen. Now, even this news, already more than 10 days have passed since that crash. Has there been any credible information? The social media, the televisions, they are all going crazy with all sorts of theories. And now, has the government, the DGCA, they say that we've got the DFTR and the CVR. They say we have the best lab. We have qualified people. It doesn't take more than 4 days to download the data and to put it in a graphic form that you can identify. But if they have found something, for me, the fact that they've taken so long indicates to me that something embarrassing is there for the system. So efforts are being made. First thing that they said is it's burnt, so we have to send it to US.
US, yeah.
Yes, NTSB has a lab which can decode anything, even a severely damaged DFDR. But then, if people knew the system, like a lot of people were saying, the Dreamliner has an enhanced recorders, one set in the nose cone and one set in the tail. Okay, if the nose cone recorders are damaged, nobody can say tail because there are enough photographs. Even Prime Minister Modi posted under one. If it was,
yeah, it was
visible for the whole world to see. So you cannot say that. I think somebody must have highlighted to them that you can't say that there's no thing. So they backtracked because just a few months back, they said we have established this lab by spending so many crores and we are well equipped. Now, if you send it to US, you are admitting that you're not capable of doing it.
Or is this some sort of an attempt to delay this entire process?
Yes, it is.
It fades away from public memory?
Which is a fact. Because even now, except for those who are watching the TV media or social media, mostly the YouTubers, they start thinking of other things. In this whole thing that Ahmedabad crash, if you notice the Chennai tail strike by Indigo did not even figure as important news. That is the 12th or 13th tail strike. But that is the way the public perceives things.
Okay. We have some questions from our viewers. This is Naveen from Salem. He says, how old should be an aircraft, for it to be operationalized or like at least
they have
operations?
Very major checks quality checks, and as long as an aircraft clears all those checks and it's certified airworthy and fit, they can fly. There is no. If you go by the old unpressurized aircraft like Dakota, they lasted for 60 years. The modern high-performance jets, they will last like 707, 747 is more than 40 years. It's still going strong. Singapore Airlines cargo is still using that. Several cargo airlines use it. So as long as the maintenance schedule is done on a regular basis, sincerely, the aircraft is safe to fly.
Okay. So there's another question from Jamil, who's from Ramanathapuram. He says he is asking you how often airport audits are conducted and airline audits are conducted. And if there are some lapses that are found, do these people get punished? Is there some serious actions that are taken?
Let me start with the last one first. Are these people being punished? The answer is no.
Both airport authorities as well as airlines. Even if they are punished, what kind of punishment would they?
They may say that he's been suspended. Has his salary been cut? Has he been demoted? Now, we work on Peter's principle. The more incompetent you are, the higher you rise. So,
okay.
So, the airline audits and airport audits are supposed to be done every year. Your airport licensing is every 2 years. If you comply with all the standards, DGCA is supposed to renew the license. But if they find that some defects are there, they issue the list of defects, and the airport or the airline is supposed to give a timeline when it will be complied with. And a fresh audit is done to ensure that this is done. You want to see, next time you talk to Yashwant Shenoy, he's got a whole list of licensing, the audit reports of Calicut, Mangalore. Then you'll see how good the audits are.
Maybe if you can compare both audits, previous year audits and this year audits, probably it will be identical, or maybe, I don't know.
Let me give you an example of Chennai. When I did the audit and I found that the rubber deposits were very high because they were using the wrong friction testing machine. We made the entire airport, they were angry because from Kasak we forced them to destroy those wrong tires they were using. And they were not carrying out, the southern region had one friction testing machine. Now I understand there are one for Chennai. But when they don't remove the rubber, what I identified for 3 years in a row, the NOTAMs issued by Chennai just before the monsoon starts, the exercise caution for rubber on the runway, on the same section of the runway where the aircraft land. Every year they will issue almost similar NOTAM, just vary the thing by a few meters here and there.
Okay.
So you know that they've done nothing.
So it's become like an annual practice. To issue advisories. So this is a question from Ajay. Licensing and compliance certification of Indian aviation engineers, and how do the organizations manage it periodically?
See, the licensing and certification is done by the DGCA. And initially you have to go through the course, get the license, and it's issued by DGCA. And you are supposed to have, for pilots, we have to undergo refreshers and simulators training every 6 months to maintain that. The engineers must also be having something similar. Now I think even the air traffic controllers have that. But one aspect that everyone is ignoring, like even in these findings, what they never mention is fatigue. Fatigue is the biggest bugbear of safety.
So, like you pointed out on this one, there is a question. Rajesh from Chennai. He says pilots and rosters. How are these things managed? Do pilots get enough rest? And what is the mandatory rest time for the pilots? Like they have to take rest.
You see, the pilot fatigue is the rules. In 2007, a very, very nice CAR was brought out, mandating the hours, the rest period, duty times, everything was very nicely done. But the airlines realized that they'll have to increase the manpower to comply with that. So they went crying to the minister, and the minister issues an order to the DGCA, and at that time Mr. Gohin was the DGCA, and he issued a thing cancelling that very good CAR, saying that the competent authority of Ministry of Civil Aviation has suspended it. Now, who's competent? Is the regulator competent or the minister competent? You see, that answers our mindset. Ever since that, it has been a case of a regulator being a facilitator to keep the airlines happy. So the pilot fatigue is swept under. Like even now, we have a thing which is supposed to come in force from 1st July or something, and something else from November. What happens if an accident takes place between July and November? So it shows that even judiciary doesn't understand what fatigue can be. And you just have to look at accidents which have taken place due to fatigue. One of the factors was even a 2-second delay in vital action can lead to a fatal crash. Like, I'm really curious on what was the flying duty period of the Ahmedabad crash pilots before, not just for that flight, but you got to take at least a week to understand what was his duty cycle during the week. And people don't understand that you also need your time to wind down. Recover, not just recover. Can you recover being in a hotel? So the off day is supposed to be at home. That was the old thing. But today, they can give you the off day in a hotel. An outstation.
ACM.
Yeah, and then you keep traveling as additional crew member, and then you may get your off day in a hotel somewhere. Now, that is not an off day. So, people are under stress, apart from the fatigue due to flying, but also the stress of absence from the family life. People don't understand that. When I was in the ICPA Central Committee, when the discussion for wage negotiation, this was in 85, the personnel department and the director of finance, they said, as it is, you're all overpaid. And there are many cases where they'll say pilots are overpaid and they're just putting it on autopilot and fly. But so I told them that, okay, don't give us a wage increase. We'll also do everything that the ground personnel do. We'll fly Monday to Friday because they all get Saturday, Sunday off. They get all the national holidays off. They get, so it is 104 days by the weekend. And then if we have another 25 national holidays. So you've got 130 days off, plus your annual leave. I said, we'll also have that. We won't fly on Saturday, Sunday. We won't fly on national holidays. We don't need a wage increase. So people who talk of, they're all overpaid, but you don't realize the kind of stress that you go through. Financial stress is another. You see, if you go and study other airlines abroad, take Singapore. It's mandatory to have 2 days off every week. and the roster period is 28 days. So you get 8 days off in 28 days. And they have 3 roster cycles. Like you can give up your off day and fly at the request from the management, but they have to compensate within the 3rd roster period. So if I've flown 6, I had 6 off days in the first roster and 6 off days in the second, it's mandatory for the airline to give me the 8 days plus the days I gave up. There's 12 days off I get on the 3rd roster. See, they respect your life, they respect your fatigue level. But here they don't. They think that and another thing which came up in the Air India Express crash in Mangalore, they did not have a published roster. As per the car, you are supposed to have a published roster so that you know exactly what you're doing on a particular day. Middle of the night, you'll get a call saying, Captain, we have a shortage for tomorrow mornings. You get a call at midnight for a 6 o'clock departure. Would you have rest when you're operating a flight? Said to blame a pilot that, he reacted slowly, everything. The stress level, and because now we have duopoly, Air India, Indigo, the rest are not also RAMs. Now people are worried that I can be sacked, I'll be without a job. They're up to their neck in EMIs because of peer pressure. That guy's got a Mercedes, I should also have a Mercedes. So they take a loan, and that is how they are. So with financial stress, the fatigue, you are in a cool run.
Okay, one last question. So this question is from Kumar from Chennai, Kumaresan from Chennai. So he says, what happens if the airline is at fault? Will there be any action taken against the airline? In this case of Ahmedabad crash, if the airline is found guilty or if the lapse is on the part of the airlines, what happens? Whether they will be punished, whether the airline will be grounded. Now that it's with the Tatas.
The airline will not be grounded. The fault with the airline may not be
made public.
No, it is not the question of made public. One thing is very obvious, like I mentioned in that interview with you. It is definitely a case of overload. The overload of even 10 kilos per passenger is going to increase the aircraft weight by 2.5 tons. 2.5 tons at 37 degrees, which was reported, while the actual temperature, many have said, was 42 degrees, will mean you need that much extra runway. See, everyone's talking of Ahmedabad being 11,500 feet. But at 37 degrees or 42 degrees, when you make the temperature correction, the effective runway length is only 9,000 feet. If it's 42, it will be about 8,500 feet. So it is not that you got 11,500 feet of runway, because the engine performance is based on the atmospheric temperature and the density. So if it's not developing the thrust, and you put 2.5 tons extra, and you got the fuel extra for the avoiding the war zones, it's like the captain asks for extra fuel, the engineer will load it and the load sheet will say that. But then if you go through the weighing machine, what is recorded for the load sheet, you have traveled a lot, I've traveled a lot. Suppose you have, instead of 20 kilos which is permitted, you got 22 kilos. 9 out of 10 times, they will just ignore the 2 kilos and put it as 20 kilos. So 2 kilos per passenger, 240 passengers is another 500 kilos. Your hand baggage. So every drop matters. And all that adds to the performance of the aircraft, affects that. And there are instruments now, the modern aircrafts. It's called a speed trend vector, which will be there on your speed tape on the primary flight display. Once you have set the takeoff thrust and you start accelerating, the speed trend vector, it's a green arrow which will come ahead of your speed, which will indicate to you what is going to be your speed in 10 seconds.
Okay.
So, and when you're crossing 100 knots, that arrow will be crossing your V2, the takeoff safety speed. Now, if a pilot this is where the training is very important. If at the training stage he's been taught all this, then he'll recognize that I'm not accelerating enough. It could be due to wind shear, tailwind shear, but we don't have wind shear because it is a fairly calm day. So the only other thing is overload. And he should have rejected the takeoff when he had sufficient runway. Now, if you look at that CCTV footage, very obvious they've taken off beyond the end of the runway. Yeah? So, you can blame the airline and say you overloaded. But then it's not the airline, which is the system. Especially, when you have VIPs. Can you expect an ex-chief minister or an MP or an MLA to travel with the minimum weight? That is our culture. They will carry so much extra, but they won't want to pay. Like they buy an economy ticket and they'll want to be upgraded to business and first class. The same thing. He's not going to go and check it in. Somebody will do it. And they say this is for the minister, and the poor ground staff guy, he's just going to write because he knows he'll lose his job otherwise. So, see, unless we change our mindset, our safety culture, we can't improve.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us.